And that is what counts. When I was there in the hospital, and when the doctor said that I have a malignant tumor, I wasn't thinking in terms of, oh, how much money have I made? It was more,
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of From Stress to Success. As always, I'm your host, stress management coach and entrepreneur, Freeman. And today we bring you a really interesting episode. I sit down with Josefine Wanner, who is a life coach. She spent 20 years in the corporate world. We talk a lot about how to break out of what we call the golden cage and how it can be so challenging to make those steps. And maybe the steps that you've been told that you need to make are the wrong steps, and that information is not as valid as maybe we think it is. We also discuss this issue that success from the outside doesn't mean success on the inside. There's an interesting balance that gets made there. The importance of having a strong, supportive partner when you make these big life changes, and just a lot about how to change from a corporate life, or maybe a life that you're not comfortable in, to a different type of life. It's this issue between, am I comfortable? Do I have freedom? Can I have both? We get into lots of topics about this. If you're an entrepreneur or you're looking to make the shift into entrepreneurship, this episode is going to be filled with value for you. I can't wait for you guys to dive in, listen to this. As always, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the show. Now let's go find out how we turn stress into success. Thanks so much, guys. Josefine Wanner is a business coach, a mentor. She focuses on helping others build a purpose-driven life, which is great. I love that. She left banking about 20 years, so she's 20 successful years in banking before she left. Now she's helping other corporate professionals create their own coaching programs and take back some control in their lives. Thank you so much, Josefine, for sitting down with us today and going to provide us with some value. I'm really excited. Thank you so much for coming on.
thank you so much, Freeman, for having me on your show. I'm super excited about being here too.
It's going to be great. I'm really excited. So the first thing that I wanted to kind of dive into is you spent 20 years in essentially what we would call the corporate world, right? And then you made this switch out of that to becoming an entrepreneur. And so what led you to that switch?
So I had been thinking, and I had been planning. I was so stuck in analysis paralysis. I even say that I tried to, and I failed to start 2.5 companies before I actually did take the leap. And the two of the companies were, for one, we didn't have the passion. We definitely didn't have the guts. One, we did have the passion, but again, we didn't have the guts. And the half, we couldn't even agree on what type of business we would start. And then one day, I learned, or my family and I will learn, that my father had incurable cancer. And my super simple Google research said that he would have 3 more months to live. Three months. And that was
Wow.
my really scary and kind of clear wake-up call that could be anyone. That could be me, that could be you, that could be anyone. And I realized then that, I was going to a work where I had climbed the corporate ladder, been the good girl, done the things you should do. And I had a stomach ache, I had sleepless nights, I was in a super toxic environment, and I was like, for what? What if I would be the one who got that death sentence? For what? So that was actually, I decided then and there, probably not within 4 weeks, I handed in my resignation, and I had no backup plan. I didn't know what to do next. I just knew I need to get out of there, because it was my fear of staying in that environment had suddenly become way bigger than my fear of the unknown. So that is what took me to make the leap. Do I tell others to do the same? No. It's better actually to start those 2.5 companies before you take the leap. And there are processes for that, and it doesn't have to be that difficult or scary to do that. But yeah.
That's I'm glad that you put that in at the end, because we so often hear in a lot of social media and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, you have to commit fully to something. Like if you want to make something work, you have to commit fully to it. And like for some people, I think that works, but I think also there is a certain art and kind of driving of knowing that you have some security to enable you to build the thing that you want to, because then you're not doing so like in a desperate manner. And I think that that's really
Yeah.
important to kind of have that, because I imagine your businesses, did they feel a bit desperate when you were trying to put them together?
The 2.5, you mean, when before
Mm-hmm.
I no, we were kind of like, do you know the kind of like the classical SWOT analysis, the strengths,
Yeah.
weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? Don't do that. That's such a waste of time. I mean, I mean, yeah, of course, you can think about opportunities and threats, and your competitors or peers that I want to talk, that I usually call them, but it's better to go out there, talk to people, listen to them. What do they say that they have problems with? And so it was more of kind of like, we have to do it like the textbook that we have learned in school or in university, and we have to follow the steps that everyone says that we should follow in the textbook, not the people who had really done it before us. And I didn't even talk to people. And when once I had quit my job, and then I realized I need to do, I really need to do something. And that was also what I wanted to kind of like help people to dare follow their dreams, to not find
Mm.
themselves in the situation where I had been, mid 40s, scared and lost, feeling as if I spent my whole career pursuing a career I didn't want to have in the first place. Okay, so where do I start? Well, what if someone says, hell yes, Josephine, let's do this, let's follow my dreams? What do I do then? Will I become liable? Is that how it works? So what tools can I put into my backpack? And that was what brought me to coaching. So to fill the backpack with kind of necessary tools that you need to feel confident and comfortable in taking those steps that you need to take. Do you need a certification? No, you don't. For me, it felt as if it was, necessary for my confidence, right? But there
Mm.
are super successful people who don't have a coaching certification. So it's not as if you have to have a certification or the next diploma, because that can also be things that hold you back, that, oh, not until I have my certification, then I can do that. Again, go out, talk to people, see
Yeah.
see what problems they have, what are the problems that you can solve. So that is a little bit like, do what you can do it instead.
Why do you think we feel the need to walk those sort of, I don't want to call them traditional steps, but like we feel like we have to do the SWOT analysis and we have to have the whole 4-page business plan and a year of
Right.
marketing information? Like, why do people feel the need to have all that in order to even start doing something?
Because we've been taught that in school for like 20 years or whatever. We probably
Mm.
weren't in school for 20 years, but my son who's 16 my son who's 16 came home one day and he said, we had a person coming to talk to us about startups. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So what did they teach you? The whole thing they had talking about was like, you need an investor, you need to have a lot of money, you need to have the finances settled before you can start a startup. And that's so wrong. Today you can start a startup from your desk with your iPhone and
Yeah.
your kind of like a headset, or you don't even need a headset, you can use the microphone you have in your iPhone. So it's like, it's the whole old things, how things are taught in the old way, that kind of keeps us stuck, that we have to have it all figured out before. And I also think might be a little bit of a cultural perspective. I come from Sweden originally, but I live in Switzerland, and in Switzerland it's very kind of like, you have to stick to whatever you chose to do when you were 16 or 17, and don't even think of changing lanes like in the middle of your
Mm.
life. In Sweden, depending on where you live or where you come from, it's a little bit the same. So I think it's a little bit of a kind of cultural thoughts. And I usually talk about the golden cage, and the golden cage is where we are stuck, and it's like our our salary, our potential mortgage, but also people's expectations and our own expectations. And those are kind of like the bars that hold us inside of this golden cage, that prevent us from dare taking the steps that we actually need to take.
Mm. How do we get out of the golden cage then?
So in my case, it was my father's death. right? Or my father's diagnosis, because he actually didn't even get those 3 months. All he got was 6 weeks. So I never even told him
Wow.
that I had quit my job. And I think he would probably have freaked out if I told him that I had given up my safe job without a backup plan, right? But um, so it can be either that, or that someone else kicks you out, you're fired, or that you're get a health issue yourself. Unfortunately, we usually have to have these scary wake up calls to actually dare move out of that cage. Before that, you often don't dare to take the steps.
Yeah, and you touched on it kind of right at the beginning there, where you said that it's, the fear of not doing it suddenly became
Mm.
greater than the fear of staying in that position. And I think that's
Yeah,
maybe part of that for people, right? Is that
yeah,
you kind of, because like, I don't want to tell people that they have to have like, a wake up call or you have to hit rock bottom before you can turn things around. But I think you do have to understand that that maybe the path that you're on isn't going to work and that you need to look at another path. Right. And I think that can
yeah.
be like the accelerator, I think, for that. And it sounds like that's for you. It happened with, that diagnosis for your father and with cancer. So
Yeah, and
very,
another wake up
yeah.
call can be a burnout, for example. People once they've had one burnout, that's usually when they change. So when I looked at, the people who were in my coaching education together with me, there was not like 20 or something that had been super excited and healthy. We were all kind of like damaged in one way or the other. Like
Mm,
people who had discovered that this is not what life is about. We want to do something different, right? They were the people who were in that room together with me.
yeah.
So I think,
It,
yeah.
yeah, it's neat that you talk about kind of the fact that you felt burned out and stuff like that. And I think this is a common feeling for some people, right? But what's
Mm,
interesting is at the beginning there, you mentioned that in your corporate job, you were like having trouble sleeping and your stomach was like upset and stuff like
mm.
that. But I think outwardly, if you were to look at Josephine as a person from the
Oh
outside,
yeah.
you probably looked fairly successful. But it's
Oh
interesting that you're
yes.
still feeling the feelings of burnout.
And I think that is like your topic, like from stress to success, and the picture of how success looks like from the outside, like a high status job, a very well paid job, had been climbing the corporate ladder for 20 years. I had worked for two of the big four companies. I had worked for Switzerland's largest banks in a senior executive position. I married. I have two wonderful kids. We have a house. On the outside, I was very successful. But, the
Mm-hmm.
inside, where I came home and I yelled at my kids, or I yelled at my husband, or I was invited at work to meetings where I was yelled at, that didn't feel like success, really. But I didn't realize how toxic it was until, I pulled the brake. And the
Mm.
funny thing was, I spoke to someone shortly after that who said, yeah, our team needs help. And he told me about their team structure and what was going on, and I said, well, it sounds as if it's a very toxic environment. He was like, no, 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 it's definitely not. And I was like, no, yeah, it is. That's
It
what it
kind of
is.
sounds like it.
But but, but when you're in it, when you're in that, you don't see you don't realize that is what it is. It's not until you're on the outside, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Or people, who break out before they're having a burnout. I think I probably would have fallen in, or I was a high risk of becoming a burnout patient if I hadn't taken that step, and because of the level of stress that I was experiencing from all areas. And that is kind of like, we don't realize how close we are until we're leaving it, actually.
Yeah. Here's an interesting question then. Do you feel like now that you've moved out of that corporate space and now you're doing your own kind of thing and you've got this coaching stuff going on, would you say you have more stressors in your life now or less than you did when you were in corporate?
That's a great question. I think, um I think you also kind of like when you move into a new position or the time that you quit your job, you totally forget about the bad stuff, everything that was going on, and you put on the pink glasses again. Whenever I meet people from that old corporate world, because I still have one leg in there, my network is still there. Some of
Mm-hmm.
my clients are still there, right? So I still get exposed to that environment. And then I feel like, oh, I'm so glad. I spoke to someone the other day, and she told me about, I can't even remember who it was, but she told me about what she was experiencing. I said, I don't experience that any longer. I don't have anyone inviting me to meetings and yell at me. If they would do that, I would say, you, I promise you. Maybe you can beep that out. That's only what I would say today.
Totally.
Yeah. You don't say that when you're in the corporate world. You just, take a step back, and then you think, there are things happening that you think grown-up people tearing kind of contracts apart, jumping on them, that happens, and that
Wow.
shouldn't happen. Yeah. And people say, why do you stay in that environment? Yeah, the pay is good, I'm expecting my bonus, they say I would be promoted the next month or the next year or whatever. They're always dingling with this carrot in front of you,
Mm,
meaning that whenever I've saved enough money, or when I've gotten my promotion, or when I've gotten that bonus, or whatever it is, it's like, but those things, even when you get those things, you will not take the step. Because then you say, oh, when I have my 10K or 100K or 1 million, you will say, oh yeah, but I need 2 million. Then I'll dare to
yeah.
do it. It will always be something else that you need to add before you dare to take the leap.
Yeah, there's this interesting phenomenon called, and you might be aware of this, called the sunk cost fallacy. So it's a psychological principle that we as humans will, even though we know something might not be working well for us, if we've committed a lot of energy to it and time, we feel the need to kind of finish or see it to an end, even though we know that it's potentially a negative thing. And I think that's kind of part of
Mm-hmm.
that, right? We're like, oh, but I've been in this corporate world for 15 years now. Like, I don't want to give up that 15 years of what I've done. It's like, but you might need to, I think, in order to start living a more free life. And I can't believe that it's as comical as people ripping up contracts and jumping on them. Like, it feels like that's something out of a comic strip, but
No,
you've just told
it's
me that
happening.
actually happens.
Yeah. It's happening. It's happening. And the thing about, I don't know if that's related to that kind of thing, but the thing about kind of other people's expectations, when I quit my job, I didn't, as I said, I didn't tell my father about it, but I also didn't tell my mom, because I was
Hmm.
afraid of her reaction. I was in my mid 40s, and I was still a little bit afraid of my mom's reaction, because I had always been a little bit like the good girl. And there was actually a coach that pointed out to me, and she said, so you have an audience of one. And I was like, yeah, that's true. I've always tried to make my mom proud. Not because she said it. She never said you
Hmm.
have to do this and they have to do that. But it was always to make my mom proud. So that is kind of a little
Yeah.
bit the other people, what we think other people expect of us, or the things that we want to achieve. Now she knows that I that I'm self-employed, but I didn't
Yeah.
tell her immediately, and her response was then, "Oh, you have to look out for yourself." I was like, "Yeah, I've been doing that since I was a teenager. It's not like it's not like that changed. When I was mid-40s. Yeah.
Yeah. Was your mom's response to it different than what you thought it would be when you told her?
No, no. She
Interesting.
kind
Yeah.
of reacted the way uh, I told my sister first. My sister's younger than I am. I told my sister. I told my sister immediately, and I said, but I won't tell mom. And she was like, no, don't tell mom. She was like, don't tell
Oh,
mom yet.
really?
Yeah. So it's like
Did
it.
did your
Yeah.
mom's response change anything, or were you committed at that point in time?
No, no, no. I had already quit. I had already handed in my resignation. It's not as if, and that's the thing, right? When you take a decision, if you need someone else's permission, like my husband, of course. I mean, I said, I will, I will hand in my resignation because of this and this. Of course, he had been in my process all the time. He knew I was in a very toxic environment. My mom didn't know that. She knew that I worked a lot, but of course she didn't know about the sleepless nights or the stomach ache or the horrible meetings. For her, from the outside, the view that she had was probably the same view that many other people had, that it looked like I was living the dream life, right?
Mm.
So if you need someone else's approval for a decision, you need to kind of involve them in the process. I didn't need my mom's approval for my decision, which is why I didn't need to involve her in it, right? So that is, but also to not involve each and everyone, because everyone will put their response to a decision based on their fears. My mom's
Yeah.
fears have always been, you have to be able to pay your bills, because that is how she was brought up.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go to school, and then you need to get a good job, and then you need to pay your bills for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
and my very first job, she organized my very first job for me. I followed kind of like in her footsteps, not because that was my dream jobs, because that was kind of like what was prepared for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to be clear on your decisions. And if you want to, let's assume you would want to I don't know, do something, but you're a little bit not so sure about what your wife thinks about it. If you want to have her opinion on that, well, you need to involve her in the decision. But if you think, I really need to do this first, like for example, when I invested in my very first business mentor, I went to my husband. I wasn't really sure about it, and I said, I want to invest in this business mentor. And he was like, no, honey, we can't do that. We can't afford that. You just quit your job. And I was like, yeah. He's right. So I waited another 6 months, and then I said, you know what? I can't do this on my own. I need the support of someone else. I will invest in this business mentor now. And she had significantly increased her prices since our last discussion. And my husband was I came to him the second time very clear, and I said, I will do this now. He was like, yeah, sure. But when I went to him the first time, I wasn't so sure. And of course, he hadn't been to her launches or seen her energy or all those things. So he wasn't as convinced as I was. And I was also doubting a little bit. So if you need your wife's decision, either you need to be clear first on what it is that you want. And if you're not clear, you need to involve her in that decision-making process.
I really like that. I like how you've emphasized the fact that it's like you need to understand why it's important to you first before you try to like explain it to somebody else, right? Mm-hmm. How important is having that sort of backing of a significant other's support in these big endeavors? And how has it sort of impacted you?
The thing about my father, I almost said, but my husband, he actually quit his corporate job before me and became an entrepreneur before me. Mm-hmm. And he was living the life, and I started to resent him, right? Because he could live the life, he could take the walks, he could do the things whenever he wanted to, and I was still at my corporate job, doing the things day in and day out, struggling. But since his business wasn't really working, I felt as if I had to stay in my positions to make it work, to get in the financial means that we needed to get in to live our life. We had significantly reduced our expenses because we only had one corporate salary instead of two. But that was the thing. So he had actually taken that step beforehand. So when I came to him and said, now I want to do it too, and he couldn't really say no because he had already done it. So I think it's again the same thing, because when I spoke about those 2.5 companies that I failed to start, I involved him in that discussion, and then it was like, oh no, should we really do that? Don't you need to do that? Blah blah blah. So it's like you have to be clear on the steps, and once you are, your spouse kind of like, it really helps to have a supportive spouse, which I have. Mm-hmm. Because I can't really imagine how it would, because it is hard. It's not a dance on roses all the time being an entrepreneur. It's like there are
It's
ups
not
and
even
downs.
close.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's ups and downs. The big difference now, though, is that I'm super more relaxed. I'm super more flexible. We never need to argue about who takes care of the kids when they are ill, for example,
Mm.
or who kind of like when the kids are home from school, who stays home from school. So that's there. We have different discussions now than what we had before. But I honestly, since my spouse is supportive, I can't imagine how much harder it would be if he wouldn't be that. What
Hmm.
is your experience?
Very similar as well. I'm very grateful for my wife and her support. We both have been kind of entrepreneurs at some point in time.
Mm,
So I think we
mm,
both understand that mentality, but it's very similar to what you're echoing there, where it can be challenging because it's one of us doing a business venture. So it's like, okay, well, who's got the stable income then during that point in time,
mm,
because we're still,
mm,
having a house, and we have
mm.
pets, and I mean, now our first kid is on the way. So it's like there's a lot in there that you have to take into account, but it's that kind of, you have to look at the long game of it, right? And it's like, is like what you're doing, like what you were doing, for example, like, was that going to be sustainable long term for any kind of lifestyle you want? And this is the entrepreneurial game that I think a lot of people have to sort of play in their brains, is like, are you willing to not are you willing to have the life of entrepreneurship, which has its pros and has the great things that come along with owning your own business? Are you willing to do the things that you have to and lose the stability that comes with that side of living? And it's like that thing that we talked about, where it's like, if the things that you want out of entrepreneurship are worth it, you will do those things. But if you don't value those enough, if you value the security more, then that's where you're going to stay. And I want to make it very clear for people as well that's okay. Like, if you
Yeah,
really like that comfort, and if you're like, man, I can't even imagine trying to do my own thing, that's totally fine. There are lots of people who are happy, successful, have great lives, who live in that corporate structure of security and stability. But I think the important thing is, and what sounds like you kind of did, is you have to look at that in a very truthful lens and be like, am I happy here? Am I
yeah,
really, or am I just saying that because I'm comfortable? And those are two very different
exactly.
things. Am I comfortable or am I happy?
Yeah, and there also to continue on that, it's not. I mean, there are companies that are not toxic, right? So it's not either toxic
Yeah,
companies or being an entrepreneur. There are so many
the
things
whole
in
range.
between.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But for me, it felt as if, because I had been in that big corporation for my last 10 years, my whole network, everything I knew was inside that bubble. And to me, it felt as
Mm,
if I don't get out here now, I will never get out. I will never get out of here. And I was still in that corporate mindset my first year. Afterwards, I was still applying for jobs. I was still kind of like, but it didn't feel right. It wasn't what I
mm,
wanted. And that dream of being totally, location independent, deciding when I work, with whom I work, and how much I work, and to not have a cap on my income, because that is what you get with a corporate job. You get a cap,
yeah.
right? So that was the things, those kind of started when I did then my started my coaching degree, and I saw the effectiveness of coaching. I was like, oh, this could be something. I could,
Mm-hmm.
wow, this could really be something. So that is kind of like what opened up my possibilities. But then again, it was like, do I stop applying for jobs and just go hard, like full time into this? And it was like, yeah, I'm doing that now. Now I'm kind of like letting go of all little bit of the security net that I have. Yeah.
Yeah. You made the change quite sort of, as some people would kind of say it, almost late, right? As in, like you said, you were in your mid 40s when you decided to make that
Hmm.
switch. I think a lot of people often feel like they've missed the boat, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Like, but you didn't, right? You like, is it? I guess the question here is that I'm trying to ask is like, is it ever too late to start?
No, I don't think so. And it's a great question, because that was also what inspired me. I sought out these inspirational people that had also had their late starts. There was one woman in Sweden. She became an actor when she was over 40, and she's now a Hollywood actor.
Wow.
And exactly, and it was like it's never too late. You can always change, but you have to set those goals, and you have to
Yeah.
dare take those steps. No one can do it for you. And I think it now with kind of like, there is so many opportunities out there for everyone. If you want to be a successful chef or actor or whatever, everything is possible.
Especially now with the amount of education we have at our fingertips, so to speak, and the information that we can gain like at a drop of a hat, right? How did
Yeah.
that switch when you first made the switch fully, and you're like, cool, I'm going to go into this coaching. I've got my certification now. Like, now I'm going to start going. Like, how did that feel, and what, kind of new things got in your way at that point in time?
Sales was a big issue.
Yeah.
To first of all set a price point on your services, and to say, what, I can help you to get paid. Because the worst business advice I ever got was to, for your certification you need to have at least 100 hours of coaching. What you can do then is, and I think 80% of those 100 hours or something like that have to be paid. But no one says how much paid they need
To
to be.
charge.
So you,
Yeah.
yeah, so you could charge, in theory, you could charge 10 pence for them, and that would be considered paid, right? But someone said, so you can do in exchange for they pay you a coffee and you give them coaching. That was the worst advice I ever got, because what that did was, I totally devalued myself and my services, my whole backpack of knowledge that I have. My clients didn't really take it seriously either, because they were like, yeah, I'm doing you a service, Josephine. That's what they
Yeah.
kind of like reacted. Did they
I'm
get
helping you get your
transformations?
hours.
Exactly. Did they get
Yeah.
transformations? Yeah. Did they become braver? Yeah. One of them is now my paid client, like creating her business offer and that. So it definitely kind of like helped them to kickstart their steps. But don't do that. Never do that. Do you have to set high ticket prices from the beginning? No, you don't. You can always increase your prices. But what helped me then was also to be in another business mentoring program where I saw what are the possibilities. How can I charge? Because another bad thing is to start Googling, what do the others charge? But that doesn't then, like, oh, you should give like five sessions for each $150. No problem is solved in 5 sessions. So don't do that either, right? So set a beginning, and then this is the transformation that I'm offering, and this is how much it costs.
Yeah.
Some people will say it's too high. I've even had someone say that's too low. So yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I think a lot of people get caught on that spot, right? They're like, what do I price it at? How do I sell this? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And it is very challenging, I think, for people to like sort of look at themselves. And there's cool practices you can do to do this, and I'm sure you've done some of them, where it's like essentially like write out the value you bring to people, right? Like, don't devalue yourself. Like, be aware of how much value you have. It doesn't mean like you can be new in what you're doing. It doesn't mean you don't have value to bring. Like, you have for yourself, for example, like 20 years of corporate, information. There's value to that information, right? So don't devalue it. The one thing that I think gets in the way, and we briefly talked about this before, is like with that, if you're like, oh, I'm going to be this coach and I'm going to set this price, now suddenly you have to live up to that. And that's where you begin to push against this imposter syndrome thing, right? Like, what's your experience
What if I don't deliver? Yeah. That was a biggie, and it also needs, and as a coach, you know that you're never responsible for your client's steps. But then you know that imposter syndrome. Yeah, but what if I ask the wrong question, or what if I forget to ask the right question, or whatever?
Yeah.
And it's with experience that you realize that a little bit, you're never responsible, and it's their responsibility to take the steps. So I have two different services that I'm offering. I have the one-to-one services where we it's they kind of like we it's a little bit more free floating sessions, but it's more like speaking sessions. And then I have my program, and there it's the steps are like set. You do this module 1, do this module 2, do this module 3, but they walk through in their own pace, right? If they decide to take 4 weeks to do their market research, it's up to them. But I can, kick them in the butt a little bit, say you don't need to take 4 months to do your 4 weeks to do your market research. You could actually do
an
that
afternoon.
Maybe not really, but set it up, do it, just do it. Come on, right? What's stopping you? But even there, it's like, yeah, but what if I ask the wrong questions? Ask again. So it's like nothing is set in stone. So I think that is kind of like a little bit too. You're never responsible for anyone to take any steps. And then they say, yeah, but I can't promise them that they will be stress-free or whatever afterwards. No, you can't promise, because if they don't take action, if they don't do their journaling as you suggest that they do, if they don't do breathing exercises, or what, I don't know exactly what you have in your program, but if they don't do the things, they won't change. But if they do the things, they will see the results.
Yeah, it's very true, and I think it's part of certainly something that I've kind of played with the concept of, right? Especially because in where I am, where I'm dealing with people and reducing their stress levels, right? How do you tangibilize that, right? Which I've developed a system for in and outgoing kind of tests, so to speak, that speak to what their levels are at. But at the same point in time, yeah, like you as a client have to be willing to make the steps to make the change. And as coaches, you can only do so much, right? You can only poke and prod and give so many worksheets. Eventually the change has to kind of incur within that person. And I guess it's our job as coaches to sort of prompt them to start making the changes. But at the end of the day, you are the only person who can change the way that you are. And you just use coaches as, kind of a guiding point to help you do that. But we can't, unfortunately, do it for you as much as we wish we could sometimes.
Yeah, and I wish, back then, before I quit my job, I wish I would have been as open and as kind of like curious about what coaching really is. I had no clue. I had my, thoughts what it might be, but I never asked anyone. I never asked anyone. I wasn't even aware of business coaching and mentoring. I wasn't, life coaching felt very fluffy, and so I mean, like, I just wish I would have known. I wish I would have asked back then. There are things that would have probably been so different, and I wouldn't have waited those years until everything blew up and I felt as I have to escape now.
Yeah. I think that coaching is just going to be somebody telling you, the solutions, which is not what coaching is, right? Like you're like, oh, I don't need somebody to just, I'll go read a book if I need that. It's like, coaching is not reading a book. Let's be very clear here. There's a very big difference between those two things. As coaches, we don't just give information and be like, here you go, here's some stuff, figure it out. Like that's not what coaching is.
And come back when you've read it.
And come back and then we'll talk about it. Like that's not how coaching works. It's great. I love that. I do want to ask as well, like now that you've kind of changed out of this corporate role, you had a vision of success then. What does success look like to you now?
Oh, that is probably the best question you could have asked, because again, we get caught into this, but I haven't reached that revenue goal that I set first, and I haven't have reached that. And actually my husband is very great at pulling me down and saying, but hang on a second, look at it again from the outside. And I actually did a lecture in my old university. I took a course in my university 25 years ago that was called entrepreneurship. And 25 years later, almost to the day, I got to give a lesson in that about entrepreneurship. Yeah, that was so cool. In front of, I can't remember, 200-300 students. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there live, but I did it online. And then at the end, I told them, you can ask me anything you want. And there was this young man who said, hey, Josephine, how did you become so successful? And that was such an eye opener to me. And I was like, oh, he's right. From the eye of a 20-year something, I had been at like two of the big four companies. I had worked in one of Switzerland's largest bank. I worked abroad because I moved from Sweden to Switzerland. And from their perspective, it was like, how did you become so successful? So I actually brought that question into my group coaching program. And I said to my clients, I said, I want you to think of this, and I want you to journal on this to say, how did I become so successful? To take a step back, to really go through what it is, the things that you have done. And I think to create that awareness, to not forget about that. No, we don't need to do that every single day, but every now and then to say, what are the things that I have done that have made me so successful? And one of the things when I quit my job, one of the things that I wanted to, and this was pre-COVID, so it felt as if it was really far away. One of the things was I want to be able to work from anywhere in the whole world, because I had just lost my father, and my mother is getting older too, and I wanted to be able to be with her. My sons are still in school, so I need to stay in Switzerland. And I wanted to, just be able to take my laptop and work from her where she lives, or from Switzerland, or take the kids to Italy or to the US or wherever, and be able to work there. And that felt so far away, and I have achieved that.
Yeah.
Like I mean, wow, what a big what a big tick mark, right? Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, it is. I guess what you're talking about there is like, having a look at A, what you have done already, and B, like really asking yourself, like, what is it that I want to do and why? And then, driving towards that, and then just recognizing, the success you've already achieved in that way, right?
Yeah.
Instead of continually looking farther out, right? Because you could do that forever. Ever and ever, you could always look farther.
Yeah, I had a huge health issue in Christmas 2021. A tumor was detected on my right kidney, and it had to be removed. So my whole 2022 actually was it was recovery. It was like I started to kind of like struggle with my confidence, and so my whole almost my 2022 was to build up that confidence again. So when everyone in January posted on LinkedIn about their amazing successes during 2022, I was like, crap, it feels as if I haven't done anything, right? So what I did then was I actually started to go through my calendar starting in January, February, March. And instead of writing down, the achievements or the dollars that came in or whatever, I wrote down the experiences instead. What did I experience every month? And of course, the surgery in January, the recovery and everything like that. But also that I already, I had surgery on the 4th of January. And I think end of January, beginning of February, I already started to go back to work with my clients. I mean, come on. Shouldn't have done that, but it's like I traveled 9 out of the 12 months. I was at speaking gigs in Rome and in France, and all these things, experiences, not only the dollar amount, but the experiences, to focus on that. And you could do that exercise every quarter or at least once per year, and to focus on, okay, so what did I experience? And I mean, your kid being on the way, that is the biggest gift you can ever get. And that is what counts. When I was there in the hospital, and when the doctor said that I have a malignant tumor, I wasn't thinking in terms of, oh, how much money have I made? It was more, well, because then of course with my father in memory, I was thinking, was that my last, am I started to count down my 6 weeks that I have? And the thing was then we need to do the experiences. And one of the dreams I had since a little kid was to go to Sicily, amongst a couple of things. And we did that in May. I said, we need to do that now. We need to start collecting these experiences. And that is so important, not to forget about that.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes, and I don't know if I read it or made it up, but it's that it's to stop spending your money on shit and start spending it on experiences, because it's
Oh,
I think
let's
those
say
are
that's your quote. That's
I think it
amazing.
is.
Start spending.
I haven't read any. Stop spending your money on shit and start spending it on experiences.
Yeah, I will quote you in my tomorrow's LinkedIn post.
Perfect. Perfect. I haven't seen it anywhere else, so I'm gonna take that one and put it into my bag of quotes. I'm curious
Yeah.
as well as we wrap up here. I love to give people something that they can kind of start doing, right? So, what are three things that you do, like actual things that you do, that help you sort of continue to find success and lessen the amount of stress in your life? What are three things? What would those three things look like for you?
Mm. Oh, great question. And one thing I do is I go for a walk daily, or at least I try to go for a walk daily, and I listen to podcasts then because what that is, it gives me energy and it gives me
Yeah.
inspiration. So I probably count them as two to be
Yeah,
because I
that's
also
fine.
listen to podcasts when I drive. So I think
Yeah.
it's just to hear other people, being inspired by other people, and gives me energy. It also gives me the thing like if they can do it, I can do
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah.
So I think that is an important, those are really important. And the third thing is to connect with people like you and I, to talk, to have real conversations with people, because that gives you the reality check that it's not
Mm-hmm.
as sunny and shiny as you see it on the Instagram pictures or the whatever pictures, but it's actually real people behind these things, and that people are human and we all make
Mm-hmm.
mistakes, and that is okay. And I think that is those
Those are
three
great.
is something I would
Yeah.
advise everyone to do.
Yeah, daily exercise, listen to something, kind of a podcast, gets that inspiration from somewhere. If it's reading, that's fine too. And then, yeah, really connecting with people and understanding that, we all are human. And I know for me, that was one of the big
Yeah.
movers towards kind of looking to reach a different level of success, with like, oh, people who have done
Mm.
this are just, they're human like I am. And we all are human. And that's a really, really important reminder. Last question. And this one's a heavy one, but
Ooh.
in one or two sentences, if you could give everybody sort of like a lesson or something that they would do that would help them, understand their levels of success, or help them live with less stress in their lives, what would be like that one single lesson that you're like, if everybody knew this, the world would be better?
It's that everything starts with just one tiny small step. And I think that everyone sees this big mountain and this big hurdle in front of them. And instead of taking small steps and not see that big mountain in front of you, but see, okay, so because if you okay, so what is this big mountain? What is it that I want to achieve? Okay, I want to be able to work from the whole world. Okay, so what do I need to do then? Well, if I want to achieve my goal, I think, being a public speaker, that would be a good thing. Okay, so what do I need to do then? Well, I need to start posting on social media. Okay, so what do you need to do then? Well, I need to dare posting on social media. Okay, so what do you need to do then? Well, I think a social media or an Instagram course would be good. Okay, so who gives Instagram courses? Ah, yeah, this person gives. Okay, do that. Start with the small
Mm-hmm.
things, and then that will eventually get out to the bigger things. And it can be book a call with you, book a call with Freeman, see what are you doing, what how does that work, and how would that help
Mm-hmm.
me. I think that is like these small things, just booking a call with someone, sending an email, send a DM, doesn't it won't kill you. That's what's the
Yeah.
worst thing that can happen? Not much. we
Yeah.
don't
I think that
climb we
that's
don't climb the Mount Everest, we don't fall off, right? It's yeah.
I think that that's such a good point. Something that I'm a firm believer in as well. Is like, just start with something, and if that starting is like you said, with the like just exploring what options are there, that's a good
Yeah.
starting point. But at least like just pick something and start doing towards an attaining thing. I think that's super valuable. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. And yeah, if for those of you listening, if you've enjoyed this conversation that I've had with Josefine today, I highly recommend to go check out Josefine on LinkedIn and kind of everywhere else they can find you. You're doing lots of kind of interesting things. So where can people find you, and where should they look for more information from you?
So yeah, as you say, I'm mainly on LinkedIn, Josefine Wanner, F with an F. Yeah, Josephine with an F, not PH, as many spell.
Oh, I didn't think of that.
I am
Yeah.
also on Instagram. I am on Facebook, but I don't really accept Facebook. Well, seldom accept friend requests because it's so spammy. So, but
Yeah.
connect with me on LinkedIn and let's start a real conversation. That would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, guys. I recommend it. Josephine's amazing to chat with. So definitely go book a conversation, chat with her. She can definitely help you. And the link for that will be in the description of this episode. So go down there, click the link. It's that easy. If you've enjoyed this, I recommend listening to the other conversations I've had on here as well with the other people. There's lots of value in there. I really appreciate as well if you guys could hit the like button, hit that follow button, all those things that people tell you to do when you've watched their content. Do that stuff. That's what gets this in front of more people to enjoy. So that would mean the world to me if you could do that. And I just want to leave you with pretty much what Josephine said there. Thank you so much for listening, guys. You spent the last 40 minutes with us, and that means a lot to both of us. And after this, we both encourage you to just start. Pick something and just start doing it. And have a great day, guys.